We want to talk to you about people between the ages of 15 and 24 who get injured and lose their life on the job.
Injuries of one kind or another happen to young workers an average of 42 times a day in Ontario. So you may have already heard about it.
Or maybe you haven't heard anything. Or maybe you did hear something and you'd figured it had nothing to do with you or your job or your life. When you think of someone getting fatally injured on the job site, you don't tend to think of that person being someone just like us.
You don't think of a 20-year-old guy named Doug who was cleaning the inside of a cement mixer when the power suddenly turned on.
You don't think of Matthew, who was 19 years old, whose head was crushed by a strapping machine in a sawmill.
You don't think of David, who was 18 and just out of high school when he was drawn into the moving blades of an industrial cookie dough mixer. Doug, Matthew, and David all had plans and dreams for their future, just like us. The only difference is their plans and dreams were destroyed in a split second.
We don't want to load you down with a bunch of numbers, but we do want to pass along a few just to give you an idea of the size of this problem.
The numbers tell a definite story, and you have to remember that each one of these numbers is a young worker, just like us.
In the year 2000 in Ontario, 17,089 workers between the ages of 15 and 24 were injured badly enough to need time off work. 16 young workers in Ontario lost their lives that year. 16 of us in 1 year.
Statistics Canada says that 57 Canadians between the ages of 15 and 24 were fatally injured at work in 1998. 60,000 more were injured. Some of us got cut and bruised and had to take a bit of time off work. Some of us lost our arms, our legs, our eyes. 57 of us lost our lives that year.
If 57 Canadian soldiers were killed in action in 1 year, it would be front page news from coast to coast. Yet, you probably didn't hear much in the news about Doug, David, or Matthew, or any of the other young workers who lost their lives that year. Probably none of them were fully aware of the risk they faced the way that soldiers are, and certainly none of them got a medal after they died the way that soldiers do.
Why does this keep on happening over and over? Why aren't the sudden violent deaths of these young Canadian workers a bigger deal? Well, we could tell you, but you're probably not going to like the answer. We're all partly to blame. That's right, all of us.
It's a fact that thousands of young workers are injured, get sick, or die on the job site every year. Yet most of us start out a job without ever thinking that the work we do and the way we do the work might be putting our lives in danger. Call it courage, call it lack of experience, call it blind faith in our own judgment and physical health. It just doesn't occur to us that we could leave for work one morning and never come home. But that can happen to us, right? Well, it can, and it does, again and again. And the young workers it's happening to were probably just as surprised about it as we would be if it happened to us.
Matthew had been working at the sawmill for about 3 months the day that he was fatally injured. Matthew's co-workers described him as an intelligent and enthusiastic worker. That morning, the pressing device on the strapping machine got stuck. When Matthew went to go look under the pressing device to see why it wasn't coming down on the stack of wood, it suddenly came down. There was no safety guard around the machine, and no one had locked it out before he went up that morning.
Megan was 17 and working at a plant that manufactures filters. The punch press she was using one morning wasn't properly guarded. She lost the tips of 3 fingers. She's back at school now, encouraging other young workers to ask questions about health and safety, especially if they're working with unfamiliar machinery.
It's simple mathematics that the younger you are, the bigger part of your life you have to lose if the unthinkable happens. In the province of Ontario, the unthinkable happened 2,079 times between 1993 and 2000. That's how many people died of work-related injuries and illnesses in those 8 years.
The total number of Canadians who were fatally injured at work in that same time period was 6,282. That's more than twice the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attacks on September 11th, 2001.
Another 3 Canadians will lose their lives on the job today, assuming it's an average day for dying on the job.
Whenever someone is injured, gets sick, or dies on the job, it's because one or more persons did not take the risks seriously enough.
A lot of those risks have as much to do with the way the work is being done as with the kind of work that's being done.
Employers and supervisors aren't the only ones who don't take every reasonable precaution to protect workers. Many workers themselves also don't take the risk seriously. Yet they're the ones who stand to lose the most by a simple miscalculation by themselves or their bosses.
Either they don't understand the degree of danger, they haven't been told about it, or they just ignore it. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. And it's why young workers are 54% more likely to be injured per hour worked than those workers over the age of 24.
Health and safety on the job is a shared responsibility. It requires the teamwork and cooperation of employers, supervisors, and workers. Everyone has to pull together to make the workplace safe and healthy. It's a tragic fact about fatalities on the job that the cause of death was usually plain and simple. And so are the things that could have been done by employers, supervisors, and workers to keep that person from being fatally injured.
Putting an end to injuries, illnesses, and deaths in the workplace is not some pie-in-the-sky goal that cannot possibly be reached. A lot of the time, it's just a matter of being aware of the risks, of being trained to assess those risks, and of making sure the work is done in a way that reduces the risk.
Every job has risks, whether it's summer or year-round. Young workers like us need to be aware of our rights and responsibilities for health and safety. If that means finding out about legal requirements before we start the job, it's definitely worth it. Our health and lives are too precious to be left entirely in the hands of other people.
Because of the equipment involved and the working environment, many forest industry occupations have a higher than average level of risk. Young forestry workers need to know how to assess the risks of the work they do. You need to know that you are entitled by law to receive training from your employer about all potential hazards, as well as safe work practices.
You need to know that you have a duty to report any suspected hazards or unsafe work practices to your supervisor.
You need to know that you are legally entitled to refuse work if you think it could endanger you or your coworkers.
Injuries, illnesses, and deaths can be eliminated from the workplace. To help make that happen, don't ever hesitate to ask questions about any health and safety problems or procedures at work. Don't wait for your boss or anyone else to make the workplace safer. Start that process yourself.
If you don't feel you've been properly trained for the work you're being asked to do, speak up. Don't pretend you know more than you actually do about your work environment or any particular work task. Your safety depends on being honest with yourself and others about what you know and what you don't know.
If you think the work you're doing jeopardizes your safety or the safety of others, speak up. You have the right to refuse work that you believe is unsafe without any fear of reprisal from your boss. The Occupational Health and Safety Act prohibits employers from dismissing or disciplining a worker because that worker has raised a safety issue or tried to make sure that act is enforced.
If you don't know the risk level of the work you're doing, speak up. Ask more experienced coworkers or your supervisor for information and advice on how to do the work safely. Always listen to your own doubts and clear them up before you do anything else.
If you see someone working in a way that's dangerous to them or their coworkers, speak up. There's absolutely nothing cool about horseplay or careless and dangerous work practices. It's against the law to work or operate equipment in any way that could endanger yourself or others. By reporting that kind of activity, you could be saving someone's life, including your own.
If you see a piece of equipment or machinery that doesn't seem to be working right, speak up. You have a responsibility to report all workplace hazards to your supervisor or employer.
If you feel the problem is not being dealt with properly, speak up. Tell a health and safety committee member or your health and safety representative about your concerns.
That's one of the ways you can fulfill your end of the shared responsibility for workplace health and safety. Another way is by using the protective equipment you've been given and by working the way you've been trained to.
If you need help to work safely, speak up. On top of whatever safety training and orientation you receive at work, there are a lot of health and safety organizations out there that can give you information, consultation, and training. You can find them on the web, or you can call them. Don't hesitate to make use of these resources. That's what they're there for.
Ontario's Workplace Safety and Insurance Board created the Young Worker Awareness Program to give students and other young workers the information they need to protect their health and safety at work. The program's website has lots of valuable information that helps us understand our rights and responsibilities. Check it out.
No job is worth being injured or dying for. Too many young workers have died and been injured without speaking up. Well, it's time to speak up for them and for ourselves by making health and safety our #1 priority at work.
Remember, the best way we can honor those young people that never came home from work is by doing everything in our power to prevent the same thing from happening to us.
The law and our own common sense tell us to do that. Let's do it.
Let's speak up for young worker health and safety.